Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Sergio Figueiredo, and I am the Chief Curator for CASA Vertigo, the exhibitions program for the TU's Department of the Built Environment. It is my great pleasure to be here today to moderate what will certainly be an enticing and compelling open conversation that the TU's Department of the Built Environment with CASA Vertigo, along with Archiprix and Archined, have organized for you today. And this is actually very simple. We did this simply by setting the stage for a conversation among three generations of emerging architects to discuss their views about the various directions that the architecture profession could and should take in the near future, and their own intentions and approaches to enact and to make that possible. So this is a crucial question that is also exclusively addressed in the Archined project, the persistence of questioning, critical reflections for the future on architecture and more, which we actually have a few copies here available, both in Dutch and in English, for those who would like to peruse. Anyway, today's speakers are fledgling designers at different stages of their professional career, and with distinctive approaches to architecture and the profession. So we have a partner at an emerging office focused on sustainable architecture, Niels Groeneveld from Werkstatt, who recently were awarded the Young Masken Prize. We also have an Archiprix winner interested in a multi-species built environment, Ziega and Berk, and an architecture student intent on revealing architecture's intellectual project, Lola Căuneac. So as they critically reflect on what it means to be an architect and how relevant the profession will be in and for the future, hopefully we'll have some glimpses and some insights of what is to come if they have such a chance. The setup for today's conversation is quite simple. So each of our speakers will share with us a position statement on how they understand what the future might bring for architecture, as well as how they are already agents of that change towards that future. And afterwards, we will have a conversation to which we also invite you in the audience to participate and pose questions. In any case, without further delay, please help me welcome to the stage Lola Căuneac.
Hello, my name is Lola. I did my bachelor studies in France, and I have almost 3 years of professional experience. Okay, does it move alone?
Sorry?
It moves alone?
Yeah.
Okay. Today I will talk about drawing, architecture, and just a little bit about building permits. So let's start with the drawing. This is an illustration by Nina Bobardi. It is a conceptual drawing, and it has been referred to as an instrument for organizing the imagination. So you can see how drawing can be used as a tool in architectural thinking. So let's keep this in mind. I was asked to consider what the future of architecture might be, but in order to do that, let's first look at what architecture is. According to Alberti, architecture consists of two aspects, materia and lineamenta. And while materia is pretty easy to understand as a concept, since it's the construction, the build part of architecture, lineamenta is a bit trickier to grasp. This is why I have a definition by Simon Unwin, and basically lineaments are the conceptual system of architecture, the intellectual instruments of control over the form of a building. And they can extend not only to the formal, but also to more symbolic and abstract dimensions. Okay, and so basically we understand that there's this built product and there is the conceptual part of architecture. And I believe that the question that is the most important for me to answer, and I believe it's a question that will also kind of influence the future of architecture, is how is this conceptual or intellectual structure translated into the built product? And if we zoom in, we see that what happens at this boundary between the architect and the building is sort of dialogue with the city hall, the developer, the engineers, everyone. And mainly this dialogue is happening through drawing. Firstly, because orthogonal projection allows for exact translation, and also because drawing respects some convention that makes it easy for everyone to read those drawings. So what happens usually is that everyone knows, but in order for the building to be built, these sort of drawings are sent to the city hall. They check if the building is safe, is accessible, and energy efficient. But we see that at no point are they checking the intellectual structure of the building. And there is no assessment of the ideas or the layers that are feeding or that are informing the design. So this is what can happen. This is a 432 Park Avenue building. It's a new type of skyscraper that came up in New York. And this is possible because in New York you can buy the height rights of the plots around you. So what happens is that the community all of a sudden found itself with this sort of building. I'm not saying anything, I'm not critical about it. I'm just saying that the community wasn't aware that this building was built, which is almost 400 meters high. So the question is, and why is this possible, is because while the city hall checks for the safety of the building, no one checks if the information that went into the design is really in depth. And it seems that the building we saw is just informed by real estate pressure. And I believe we all agree that the value that lays in architecture is its ability to understand the whole of something, its multiple layers such as cultural aspects, political aspects, etc. And by understanding these multiple elements and their relationship, we can come up with an actually informed and coherent design. But what we see happen with 432 Park Avenue and with a lot of buildings nowadays is that this sort of, there's a sort of emergence of an arid conceptual world. And I believe it has a lot to do with architectural drawing having lost its creative qualities, but also with the architects basically losing ground to exterior pressure. So then what is the solution? I propose we create an external demand for it. Just as the building permit assesses the feasibility and safety of design, it can also provide a space for architects to explore and express their creative process. The building permit that now facilitates the development of contentless buildings can become the envoy for informed high-quality design. Finally, but I strongly believe that when it comes to the future of architecture is that there will come a day when architecture will lose its ownership or dominion over the construction. But I'm also very sure that architectural thinking, and thus architects, are bound to remain a fundamental, authentic, creative force for the built environment. And this is my last slide. It's like a little story. Utopia. The screen shuts down. Deep sigh. The developer, after tiredly removing his glasses, asks, "What about the conceptual system?" Silence ensues. He continues, rising and walking towards the door. "We made it clear multiple times, without the documentation of the intellectual structure, we cannot honor the building permit requirements." Slams the door. The time of superfluous architecture is gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Lola. I'm just going to set up for Ziega now. Okay, this is Ziega.
Thanks. My name is Ziega from Berk. I'm a landscape architect and I work at MUST already for 8 years. The office I'm teaching at the Academy of Architecture and also doing research at the MC, the North Sea. 6 years ago, I realized, I had a reflection on all my projects, and I realized that this relationship between human and nature was always, in one way or the other, it was there. So what fascinates me is what we bring in as a human being into this world, with our structures, with our materials, and how does the living processes react on that? What is this interaction? What is this exchange? So yeah, from this fascination, I started kind of my graduation project. I searched in philosophical, in rights, and in artistic vocabularies how we want to deal with this future and to what kind of new basic attitude and cultural change we need to go to create a better world. So I was searching for an assignment and for a landscape where this tension was really there, and I came actually to the sea as a landscape related to all the projects and the plans which are projecting nowadays at the sea. And in short, I'll explain in a few slides my graduation project, which was nominated for the Archiprix. And in this project there are my statements or my wishes for the future of architecture, landscape architecture. So the project was Doggersland, the Dodgerland, the nursery for the North Sea. And my main question was, how can we improve or use the energy transition to improve the North Sea ecosystem? And for the Dodger Bank, shallow part in the Netherlands, I designed a wind farm from the perspective of the intrinsic values of the landscape itself and all the wishes and demands of the marine life. How would a wind farm, offshore wind farm, look then, if you look at it from that perspective? This is the Dodger Bank in the middle of the sea, and it's also location for the climate goals for 2050. More than 50,000 windmills should be planned in the North Sea, and more than 8,000 are planned on the Dodger Bank. This is first. So what we did with the North Sea, the last 100 years, we used the sea for exploiting for fisheries, gas, oil, salt, sand, you name it. And the sea looks like now a barren desert. While this hard substrate, which was there, with a lot of oyster reefs and stones, this hard material is really the breeding ground for all this marine life. So here you see a plan of future visualization of the possible wind farms which are planned there. But this hard substrate of these windmills is a chance, but then we have to do it the right way, and this is the moment to do it because the plans are huge, and in the next 10 years we will roll out a lot of wind farms over the North Sea. But in order to do that, we really have to get to know this landscape and intrinsic values and all the inhabitants of the landscape. 60% of the Netherlands is sea, so if we don't know the sea, how well do we know the Netherlands? So I researched all sorts of life in the sea, marine life, and searched what are their needs, what are their wishes, what are their demands. One needs very specific conditions, so you can do a lot with designing, and other ones are happy in all sorts of habitats. And after designing or researching all this marine life, I transformed that into several parameters. So what are the elements you could design a wind farm with? So I designed a wind farm from the scale of the foundation of the windmill till the wind farm, to the scale of the wind farm, till the scale of the whole Dodger Bank. So I designed a method to do that, and this method already in itself leaves a different, more diverse landscape behind. And you get a rich amount of possibilities for foundation, you get typologies of wind farms, and then you roll it out over the whole the Dr. Berk landscape. And here you see also the wind farm is following the old riverbeds, which are hidden in the soil or in the seafloor. And we don't know a lot about the sea. We don't know a lot about all these inhabitants. So we aim now how more diversity we create, how better that is for the diversity of habitats and the biodiversity of the sea life. And also because we don't know a lot, to roll out in maybe 50 years this wind farm, this moment of constructing, making, designing, but researching it again, and then adapting it to the next rollout of the wind farms, is even a chance to get to know this landscape even better, and to create this rich underwater world. And my statement here is as well that the sea is a landscape, and also creating or designing a wind farm is to create a landscape. So with this attitude, I try to, I look to this assignment and this how it could possibly look like. And on several ways, trying now to get this project a little further. So this is a collaboration with the Embassy of the North Sea to actually rejoin the tender process, to get to know this tender process, how is that going. And we ask ourselves also the question, what is a just rechtvaardig, just wind farm? So we take the perspective a bit broader, but we do that in an interdisciplinary team. So this is one way how we continue. And here I want to put some statements more underneath each other. So with this assignment, I wanted to say that we have to get to know these intrinsic values of the landscape, get to know these inhabitants, what do they need, what do they want, and also get to know possible new inhabitants. So, and how can you facilitate them in their needs, in all these design choices which have to be made in these wind farms. And what can we bring instead of only gain from the sea, especially for the sea, this is very valid. And I was just saying, yes, the sea is also a landscape, a sea landscape, and making a wind farm is a landscape. And I think our disciplines should get involved. 2 weeks ago I was at the Days for the North Sea, and the sound resonated that this is really a spatial question also for the North Sea. But there were almost no designers. So this is really, a lot of spatial design choices have to be made, and we can really bring a meaningful position there. And what is a rechtvaardig landscape? Also, what is an rechtvaardig just wind farm? And also this long-term thinking, and thinking also in the term of ecological processes. They have really a different time scale. And what does this time scale mean for the things we have to do today and tomorrow? So also this long-term thinking is very, we should exercise ourselves in that to make the better choices for now. So this is one of the few of the statements for our field. Curious what you think as well, but first your story.
Yes, I'm just going to again change the PowerPoint and invite our next guest. Okay.
It's a fire in the background.
I know. Okay, please, let's welcome our next guest, Niels Groeneveld.
Hi, I'm Niels. Nice to be here, and especially as sort of the eldest guest, which is also a new position for me. Let me start my story when I was a bit younger. I'm 36 now, and I started here at the university as to become a mechanical engineer. So I started at the engineering department because I had the idea that I was going to change the world for the better with my engineering skills. I thought that was what engineers do. But after 2 years of mathematics and statistics, I decided that that was not the way I was going to change the world. So overnight I decided to study architecture. I didn't really know what architects do or what in this building what students are taught, but I just knew that was my way to go at that moment. And the only regret that came with that decision was that I thought, yeah, but architects, they are mainly involved with aesthetics and nice things, but are they really always aimed at creating a better world? Or so luckily during my study, after a couple of years, I found out, of course, that architects have an enormous impact, and that we stand at the beginning of a huge chain of events that is very impactful in the world. And so I was again really happy that I was in a position to be a driver of change. So yeah, there has always been a strong ideological component, as you can hear. And then I during my study I sort of found I didn't find some things here at the university, like how to build really sustainable with bio-based materials, the ecological aspects of it. That was in my time very there weren't any chairs or teachers. It was just starting, so I had to do my own research. So I Googled endlessly, and I spent nights on self-built platforms in Belgium, and people that were constructing their own house, and how did they do it. That was sort of parallel to the study here. I decided I need to get sort of that hands-on knowledge. And then I had my graduation project, which I loved the entire year, and it was nominated for the Archiprix. So this last year was sort of an academic bubble for me, which was really lovely to be in, and with the Archiprix and the International Archiprix, and it was just a really nice final stage of my study. But then that bubble sort of burst pretty quickly when I started working on my first actual project, because I had a commission very small for an extension and a boathouse, and I discovered to my own horror that I had no idea where to start and how to build a house. So I said to the client, like, let me build this myself, because then I get to know how that actually works. And I said to the contractor, please hire me to build my own design. And so we had a really nice cooperation. So I worked with their experienced craftsmen, and it was sort of a pressure cooker to get to know all these practical things that I didn't learn here. There was a sort of this DIY approach was a sort of a necessity, actually, to take myself serious as well, to truly be able to say I'm an architect. I mean, then you have to know how to build. So and this DIY approach or mentality sort of stuck with me, and also with Raoul, my founder, which I founded Werkstatt with. Werkstatt, the name itself, it says it's German for workshop. So the workshop, yeah, it's an important part of our design process. And this DIY mythology, not mythology, but mentality, has sort of evolved, and we discovered now we're working on an exhibition. We have to look back on our work and come up with reasonable stuff to say about it, and actually think that's sort of our mentality that maybe makes us not unique, but at least makes us Werkstatt. For example, when we started, we really had the strong conviction that we should build more bio-based and vapor open and more healthy buildings, and not focus so much on installation technology but more on material technology. But there were no contractors that could actually build what we wanted, so we really had to train our own contractors, first find them, and then educate them, and so this sort of hands-on building knowledge really came in handy. So we just had to do it ourselves, and now we want to scale up. We want to increase our leverage with our way of thinking. So we now discover that private clients really like what we say. They are belangen. Can't find the word. When they make a house for themselves, they can decide on the materials to build it with and the way they want it built. So when we say they need to build a healthy house and think about all these materials, they can follow us. And I mean, big developers have sort of other interests. So we started looking into the more financial background of how do bigger developments come to be, and we also found that the regular processes that you also talked about don't always support that. So we decided, okay, let's come up with a way to also design this whole financial system behind the development. So we founded Eindhoven's Woongenootschap, which is a cooperative form of developing, supported by colleagues in Rotterdam. Also when it's not there, just do it yourself, and that's how we learn and learn quick, because the world is evolving really rapidly. So for us, this has been a really good mentality to keep up and stay ahead of the developments and steer them in the direction we want them to go. So maybe that's what I would like to see more, and have the chance to do this in the future as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all three of you for a very interesting introduction to how you see architecture and how you see architecture and landscape architecture. I should not distinguish so clearly the difference. How you see it moving forward. But it all seems that for the three of you, one issue that is important is how I'm just going to say architecture, I mean also landscape architecture. How architecture relates to its partners, be it other species, be it financial developers, be it contractors that you teach and allow them to develop new techniques. So how crucial is this relation with others for architecture's upcoming future?
I think very crucial. Well, our field is so interdisciplinary, and we live in such a complex world. How we make cities, landscapes, so much is involved. So also all these actors are and processes are so related, same as political processes, also for example the tender processes, and to get to know these processes and how to work together or to relate or yeah, it's very, very necessary to get to know these processes and to interact. Yeah.
So very important.
Yeah.
Thanks. But I believe also, as we see, the object of architecture is not really connected. I mean, the architect doesn't work on it. Maybe in your case it happens, but usually with big projects you don't really touch your creation, let's say. So you have to go through all these people, and your ideas have to go through all these actors to actually be built. And I believe that was architecture, that is what architecture is actually about. It's about being able to build bridges between these actors that will then communicate further your ideas or your design.
I completely agree with this. But I think that the issue perhaps facing architecture now, or as you may understand it, is the position in which architecture is placed, in which, for example, for financial restrictions, for technical restrictions, for process political restrictions, the ability of architects and architecture to, let's say, not manipulate, but to be able to use those processes to develop a better outcome. Much more, you had something you said about the sea. How can you just not gain, but also bring something to the table, right? In this case, to the sea. But the same mentality can be applied to any, in fact, spatial design project. How can you also bring something to the table that is left there for others to take as well? But can architecture have the possibility to bring those things to the table?
Yeah, let's start easy. Like Lola was also mentioned, or maybe we talked about it before this discussion started, but that the role of the architect, of course, has diminished quite badly over the past years, and that sometimes we, as architects, are forced in a position to just accept that and then do whatever is left for us to do as good as we can. But I think sort of a rogue attitude and maybe, yeah, I also still consider myself young, and our projects are still relatively small, so we just say it's going to happen in a different way, and if not, then not with us. So it's kind of yeah, I mean, taking the responsibility, and yeah, I don't think as architects we are the only one who should do that. I mean, everyone is of course obliged to take his own responsibility, to face the challenges and to help them. But yeah, I think as architects we should just stand up, because I think we see, sort of have the overview and not the direct interest that the developer has to earn money with a certain development. We want to leave something that stays there and functions and adds something to the local community or something. So, non-answer.
I think that we're going to have a lot of non-answers today, because it's the nature of the issue that is, I would say, so abstract, and it's at the same time so material, because you have the impact. I think that the Ziega's project really shows that you said
this has been considered to be a spatial issue, and yet there were no designers there. And that is also what you can sort of see, perhaps in a more abstract way, what is happening also in other parts of the domains of architecture, which is a spatial issue, but then architects are somehow pushed to the sides, or are not really, or are only considered interesting or valuable for the type of financial development that they can bring to a project. So this is a tremendously, I don't want to be weak with this. This is a tremendously difficult question, but how can we carve new space? How can architecture transition and become relevant once again? Because it's incredibly relevant to everyone in this building, but once you go out to the real world, things are slightly different.
Well, I think what is our role is to imagine everyone in every process, a building project always looks to us like, well then, how will that look like then? And not just a building, but how will the future look like? So we're taught or have the gift to imagine stuff, verbeelden, to show how that could look like, and I think that is a really powerful skill. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question because Ziega, she said there was only one designer at the North Sea conference, and and I was wondering, how do you get your colleagues into those kind of conferences? Because I agree with Niels, but one way or the other, you can look here. No people are sitting here trying to get a conversation about what architecture can be for the future. So how we are going to address your colleagues to really get involved into those very big questions?
Indeed, what you said, it started with imagine and visualize and think quite radical and see what space is there, because the ideas in my plan are very radical, and it's not maybe all the things are very realistic, but I had like very interesting conversations with the marine biologists, which are thinking on a large scale of that, and they got new ideas of that. So, and yeah, the other thing is that, for example, this 2 days of conference of the North Sea, yeah, I just went there, supported my office, like go there and talk with everyone, and so that's what I did. And I think you need a long breath, but with some people, you see, oh, yeah, I mentioned a spatial question, but it means more than a blank sheet and fill it in. So.
Yeah, okay, but how do you get your colleagues also going to those kind of conferences?
My colleagues in our field.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question as well. I think, yeah, there are challenges, and to see what are the spatial challenges, because this energy transition there is, the food transition is there, the water system will change. And the all spatial questions, so yeah, to have this conversation within the office, within the academy, so to teach there is one way, and to have this exchange with the new students and already the new generation, yeah, on all these different skill levels and actions.
Because, just one example, I went to a lecture of Job Flores the other day, and it was really packed. So they come to see images and stories of other architects. Yeah. The really important questions they don't seem to address or attend. So how are we going to get them to those?
Maybe in their time we just start and everyone can join. Yeah.
Well, for example, like I showed in the presentation, I'm very interested in visual thinking, and I actually believe that the way we are taught in school, what software to use, has a very big impact on how we think about architecture. So I believe that the change has to happen at this level, at the university level, because I feel like a lot of focus in the university is on buildings, on buildings that are already finished, but we don't really understand how they've come to be. We don't really look at the process behind that. So I believe if there will be a bit more focus on the intellectual part of architecture, students will be more curious and more metaphysical, let's say, and ask more questions like this. But if we only focus on the build,
But Lola, you're moving on to a metaphysical part. But if you, because what I find really interesting, and I'm sure you're okay if I share this, is that you had this idea about the importance of an intellectual project for architecture. But you didn't stay in your corner and said, okay, I'm going to do something in my projects about this, or I'm going to find someone about this. You said, more people should be caring about this, so what did you do? I know the answer.
Oh, about anarchy. Oh yes, so this year I joined Anarchy, an association. Student association for architecture, and every year there's a policy and we can say what is our initiative. So I went to Anarchy as a board member and for the activities commissioner. So basically I organized the activities, and the initiative that I proposed was Let's Get Meta. And basically we are trying to organize lectures and workshops for students to use more of this visual thinking that I'm talking about, and also to question a bit more their creative process. So I suppose this is a way of bringing change.
I asked you to talk about this because I think that Niels and Ziega have already mentioned their own role. You know, the DIY, that you didn't know or didn't have contractors who could fulfill the specifications that you had for the type of materials that you wanted to build. So then you just did it yourself. Ziega, you saw that there was a gap in the, let's say, the knowledge continuum between marine biologists and the spatial design of the sea floor, and you just joined this conference and you were the only designer there. But I think that it's, without wanting to individualize on it, I think it's these individual actions that eventually lead to greater change, systematic change even. But it requires people like you who are willing to actually do things differently. Have you ever thought about how differently you are trying to do things, or that just something that comes natural to you?
I read from people's reactions that we do stuff differently, but to me it feels like very natural. Because you asked interesting questions, how do we get other designers, other architects into the fields we care about and where we see that we should extend our influence, like in marine environments, for example. I think the same was when we started with sort of ecological architecture. That was very still in the alternative sphere, so very, hippie stuff. And it was, for architects, it was sort of not cool to be involved in that kind of challenges. So I think that is a sort of evolution that maybe you are talking about. It takes time for designers and architects to realize what kind of influence they can have. I mean, if you look at social design, it's also a very recent field or discipline. Maybe it evolved very rapidly over the last 10, 15 years, but before that there were no social design schools or whatever. And now it's very cool to as a designer to be involved in that kind of stuff. So maybe when we have more inspiring projects like yours, there are more designers going to focus on the North Sea floor, because they're challenging enough. But yeah, I think designers are also sort of, it's also a herd. You know, they follow each other and they follow the inspiring leaders I mean, every day we are bombarded with really aesthetic, with beautiful images on social media about beautiful buildings, and we all think that's sort of the main goal. But yeah, we don't see how these projects came to be. We don't know the ideological or intellectual thoughts behind them. So I think we're following sort of the wrong examples based on the very snappy media that we get presented. But I think also there is a sort of deeper tendency to literally dive deeper in your case. So yeah.
Because I think that there is this, at least in your comments, but also in Lena's remarks, there's this tension between the values that you are bringing to your own design and somehow the reality of the discipline or the profession. And it is interesting because, for example, Niels, you used the words leverage up your knowledge or leverage up your intentions, because in fact Werkstatt is in this position that you've been doing small projects, but you are in the position of now, well, aiming for larger projects and actually be able to take on this ideology that you have developed in terms of materials and approaches to architecture and carry it on to larger projects. But that's not always easy. In fact, that's where a lot of ideologies go to die, if I put it bluntly. But I shouldn't say that. But how do you see it? How can you leverage up your intentions?
Well, it feels like someone called us sort of product of our time. When we started, it was really people said to us, don't be so sort of narrow-minded and focused on this innovating in sort of the building industry. But the times have sort of speeded up and sort of kept up with us, or also ingehaald. So now we don't have to explain everything anymore because people understand. And that also gives us leverage, because we've been shouting some message for 7 or 8 years now, and now there are also more reasons to sort of listen to that message. So it's also sort of, I think, as designers, you should really be aware of the time frame you're operating in, and also where which stories stick. It's all about the narrative. When we started, for me it was basically I had to save the world, and I didn't want to build with polyurethane because it's oil derivative, and wars were being fought over it, and not on my watch. So that is sort of. But when you explain that story to a private client, and also it costs, I don't know, 20% more expensive, then they quickly stop listening. So we came up with the idea of, okay, it's about health. We have to focus on healthy environments, and then that story stuck. But now the world is ready to hear the story about CO2 and oil and reducing our impact, etc. So now we change our story also to what our audience is ready to hear. And I think that's really important. That don't be too far ahead of the music. I don't know if you can translate that Dutch saying. Walking too far ahead of the band, but also not behind it. But you have to be exactly at the front.
I also believe you can build up leverage, like you said, with statements. And I feel for architects for a long time, these bigger figures that came throughout history were always someone who had something to say that was very radical and kind of like maybe not in front of the crowd, but actually maybe in front of the crowd, but with a face towards the crowd and like to the future. and they had kind of, I don't know, Le Corbusier or anyone who comes with this idea, or Rem Koolhaas, they come with an idea and all of a sudden you're like, what do you mean? And the fact that I think you can change, you can bring change with a statement or a story or something that is so radical and so parallel that makes the other ones kind of reflect upon themselves. Reflect, yeah. So, yeah, I believe architects have this. Maybe they don't have drawing anymore, or they don't have buildings anymore, but they still have this power of discourse and storytelling. So I think that's our weapon.
And your whole project is about storytelling, because you don't know how to design this foundation of this windmill or how it exactly works, but it's really easy to fill in those technical challenges and just go with the story, because it makes sense.
And the story is compelling, like the sea is a landscape. The sea is a landscape. I don't know, it will stick with me for a long time.
Yes, the story is compelling, but it's interesting because you mentioned that the important thing is sort of to make a statement, to say something, to perhaps go in front, but looking to the rest, and to make a statement. But that leads me to sort of a double question, which is, how important is really thinking in architecture today? Like, how much is it valued? And how is architecture culture supporting that, or subverting that?
Well, I believe the bigger you are, I'm thinking of OMA and AMO, and I believe they capitalize very well on architectural thinking, because right now they are using this sort of thinking and expanding to other domains and doing projects outside of architecture, because they realize that the value that our thinking has, and you can actually make money out of it. But of course, maybe the culture of architecture in general doesn't really put that much value into thinking and more into visual, I don't know, but yeah.
But is there a way to combine the two? Is there a way to combine interesting visual material with healthy materials, or with supporting the ecosystem of other species, or even developing an intellectual project? Is the role of aesthetics and of formal expression exhausted, or can it be combined with social causes, political causes?
Yeah, I think our sort of in our profession, the more technical role is very, very narrowed, and it is getting smaller and smaller. But I think there are, the original place of the architect, of sort of who has the overview of this process, that is still in our DNA, I think. And to give you an example, the reason why we like to build with hemp as a material is, of course, because it's very healthy and natural material, but also because we can then connect our building industry to the agricultural industry, and farmers who have now a very low value position, they become suddenly involved in a very sort of chain of high valued building products, and that is just a challenge that I, as an architect, for me is really clear. But no one else is doing that. I mean, there are no sort of professions that link different ecosystems or professions. So I think as architects, we maybe we are taught that without our own knowledge, but that's that way of looking at things and try to connect all these disciplines. That is definitely something we can, well, maybe not make money with directly, but at least inspire and then and create a world for ourselves. So.
Yeah, I think it's all related to this cultural change we are in need of and we are looking for, and how is that related to this story and to these new stories. And this cultural change, it always takes very long time, and the profession or person or field has their own tempo in going with this change. Slowly and fast. I think in every profession we have to think how we can benefit and facilitate this cultural change. So I think we're all trying to do that on certain scales, on different tempos, on different materials, on different, but it's all related to this, I think.
But we are not facilitators.
No, no, not facilitators, but like to inspire to get in that direction and to see why and to see the possibility. Yeah, also that part is.
But I think it's funny that you mentioned aesthetics and thinking as if they're like, because they seem they are different, but there's like this philosopher John Dewey, and he talks about aesthetic experience as something that starts from the beginning. You have a problem, you try to solve it, and then you come up with a result, and all of it is an aesthetic experience. So there's also this misunderstanding of aesthetics, and maybe people play more on the visual side of architecture, but basically what aesthetic is supposed to mean is that there is this whole process behind it that justifies the final form and image.
No, I completely agree. No, I was talking more about the sort of flattening of architecture to imagery, and how that can and should be coupled to thinking to a certain degree, so that thinking also becomes valued in the, let's say, the field of operations of an architect. And that's really why I think that what the three of you are arguing for or standing up for is really inspiring, is because you are declaring that architecture is not depleted in construction, is not depleted in one specific presence. It is completed by other things, it's complemented by other things. And be it in connecting different ecosystems of professions, be it in connecting different species or different ways of thinking, but that there's a space for architecture to grow and to somehow regain the relevance and the position that it could and should have. Anyway, are there any questions from the audience? Besides Marina. But of course, Marina, you're also welcome to. No? No, of course we were never going to get at any conclusive responses today, but that was also, that's also the point, is that there aren't any. That there's a multitude of possibilities for architecture, and hopefully we will all be around to see you explore them and your colleagues in the near future. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and yes, let's maybe have a beer.